Today, on our parlor car chat here, we're continuing, it's part 2 of a fall color speeder excursion that I took back in 2017, put on by this group, Motor Car Operators West, which is a West Coast association of speeder owners or motor car owners, primarily for the purpose of getting together and doing excursions on various railroads all over the West, and actually even more than that. This one was in the middle of the country in Colorado. I know they've done them much of the United States. They've gone to Alaska. They do a lot of excursion trips. So if you're a motor car kind of person, this would be a good group to get a hold of. And also, if you end up getting excited about this sort of thing, they also have a for sale page on their website with speeders and speeder equipment and accessories and trailers and blah, 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 that you can get too if it's something you want to jump into with both feet. Okay, so here's our orientation map. Where in the world are we? If you, the red box in the upper right-hand corner tells you the area that's covered by the bigger satellite image map to the left of it. And we are going to be on the return trip. We ended last time going to La Veta, going over La Veta Pass and stopping for some fun in the town of La Veta. Well, we're picking up here, and we are returning from La Veta through La Veta Pass back to Alamosa, which is on the left-hand, in the left-hand section of that red circle on the map. This is part of what was referred to as the Creede branch of the SL&RG, the Denver and Rio Grande Western. They had just finished getting rail to La Veta or La Veta Pass or somewhere in the area, and then they put in the line that ran from the pass basically all the way across the valley through Alamosa to South Fork, which is way on the left on this map, and ultimately up into Creede, which is far left on the map. So, but right now, this segment that we're going to be showing pictures from is this section from La Veta back to Alamosa. It's a live railroad. San Luis and Rio Grande operates on these tracks all across the San Luis Valley, the area is known as. So here's some tanker cars. I'm not sure if they're in storage or just in place, ready to go somewhere, but it's a live railroad, so you see activity. And there's one of the speeders, if you didn't notice, way back there in the corner, little guy coming around the corner. Pretty rural environment, as you might imagine out there, farming and spread out. Here's a couple of horses that we spotted along the way. It really is breathtaking countryside, and to be in something as intimate as a motor car, as traveling down the rails, enjoying the scenery, it's pretty remarkable. If you ever get a chance to do it, I would highly recommend doing it. And fall in Colorado, this was September, is pretty nice. It was pretty cool. In fact, most people had heavier type jackets on in the morning, but by afternoon, those were all being changed out for lightweight vests. It's pretty nice environment. There's the camera is on one side of a big horseshoe kind of curve, and there's the other part of the track. You can see a little speeder right there on the track. I don't remember this well enough to tell you which way that speeder's going or if he's ahead of us or behind us. But there he is. And there's our guide. He is clearly ahead of us, so he is moving to the right. The San Luis and Rio Grande provided us with a guide to make sure we didn't get in any trouble or in anybody's way as we were taking up their main line from La Veta to Alamosa. Alamosa is where they're basically headquartered. One of the several tunnels, I forget exactly how many, but there are several tunnels on this trip to get over the La Veta Pass. Those are always fun. You may or may not recall last time as we were going towards La Veta, I mentioned that we passed an amphitheater that was sort of like halfway up the hill to the top of the pass. This is coming into that amphitheater area at a location known as Fur. And that you can see that brick sort of sidewalk to the left of the track there. That's basically the loading and unloading area for the trains that bring people up to the amphitheater and then take people back to Alamosa from the amphitheater. And there's one of our speeders coming in. You can see there's kind of a semi-distressed look on their faces. They were having some engine trouble as they were pulling in here. It turned out to be quite fixable, but and there's their motor. That's quite the flywheel situation there with that. So they're trying to figure out what was going on. There's another open air speeder coming in. One of the enclosed two-seaters. Speeders come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, open air, closed air, usually minimum of 2 seats. You can go up to 6, there are bigger ones too. And all kinds of either hard body, some are soft body, some are a combination of a hard frame with cloth drop down sides, that kind of thing. There's quite a range of styles available of these speeders. Wide open country we're traveling on. There's kind of a shot of most of the group. I forget exactly how many cars we had, but probably on the order of 20. So maybe you're looking at about half of them. Out on the plains, we're approaching San Luis, or not San Luis, we're approaching Alamosa in the middle of San Luis Valley. Farm country for sure. And out on the plains, it's pretty wide open. We had a storm that chased us for a while that day, but fortunately I don't think we got wet at all. But if it was, it wasn't very much. Again, as you may recall, when we left Alamosa heading up for La Veta during the last session, we had to pull off on a siding for a freight train that came through, a San Luis and Rio Grande freight train. Well, this is that same area. We didn't have to wait for a train today, but here we are going through the area where the sidings were, and you can see there's lots of either storage or active placed cars from the railroad that we're just scooting down the middle of, like it happens every day. Okay. Now, we're about to head out on a different excursion. The next morning, I think it was, after getting in the night before into Alamosa from La Veta, we headed out for Central, which in this circle red, the red circle area, here's Alamosa in the kind of the lower right area of the red circle. What we're going to be doing is following Highway 285 up to Monte Vista, where it also is or becomes Highway 160. But at Monte Vista, rather than following on west, which is the Denver and Rio Grande line Creede branch, we're going to get off, well, switch over to the San Luis Central Railroad, which runs from Monte Vista up 285, up along Highway 285 to a town called Central. which is why it's called San Luis Central. So here we go off on that trip. As is very common, in fact, obligatory, every excursion starts with a safety briefing in the morning. So probably all the cars are placed on the track behind us, and we've gotten together to hear any special notes for the day. What are we going to run into in terms of having to get around or get out of the way or move past, all that sort of thing. So the morning safety briefing, and this rabbit attended also, I guess just to make sure we didn't get in his way or he didn't get in ours. This is a typical scene on a speeder excursion. Anytime we're crossing highways or any kind of road, we generally flag it ourselves. Someone will get out of the front car, get on the road and make sure everything's copacetic for the cars to go across. They go across, and then we retrieve our flaggers and off we go. It's sort of a let's make sure we do this safely way to approach crossings. And if you didn't get to see last week, here's just a notion of what traveling with one of these speeders looks like. Typically they're on trailers, and trailers that are designed to have speeders on them, which means they have ramps. The two rails you see here going up and down from the trailer let you roll the speeder down onto the ground, and if you're really lucky, you can line things up so that they roll right onto the track that you're going to. We're just outside of Alamosa now, heading west, and you do see a number of industries along the way, obviously served by the San Luis and Rio Grande, and lots of farmland. Now I think we're in the Monte Vista area, and have already switched over to the San Luis Central line. This is one of the first pieces of equipment that we came across on their railroad, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's like a little speeder cart, but with quite the little crane operation attached to it. I'd not seen anything quite like that before, although I'd seen a lot of carts like that, mainly just with basically nothing on them but a platform for hauling things around. Here's some other equipment that was stationed off to the side of the tracks at the headquarters of the San Luis Central. The guy on the right, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, but he's one of the San Luis Central Railroad guys. That railroad, by the way, was founded in 1913 to haul sugar beets. And it was acquired in 1969 by the P. Vine Corporation, which I think still owns it today. And it's basically a 13-mile railroad that runs from Sugar Junction, which is where in Monte Vista the railroad basically starts on the south end, and runs up to Central Colorado at the north end, 13 miles of track. Here's probably just some informal chat going on as we gather for the safety briefing with the San Luis Central folks. Quite a bit of old equipment, reused and otherwise, or reused. Like this old caboose, probably a Denver Rio Grande caboose at one point. It's now a storage room of some sort. There was a lot of that down at the San Luis Central headquarters. There's another caboose, still on its wheels, not quite as bad a shape as the other one. Obviously Rio Grande, it's marked that way. As we were heading out of Sugar Junction, there was a work crew that had pulled off onto a siding for us to go by. Or maybe they were actually working down there, I'm not sure which. But in any case, they were out of our way, and on by we went north to Central. And this is very typical of what we saw along the line. Farm equipment, farm buildings, farm storage sheds, farm elevators, farm. It's all farmland, basically, from Monte Vista up to Central. Just a straight shot across the plain. Again, very typical of the scenery. And it was all about potatoes. At least what we saw, anyway, was all about potatoes. Potatoes, you want some potatoes. There's one of the San Luis Central guys manning a switch. I'm not sure what was going on there, but you can see at the very right-hand side behind the hopper car is the locomotive. We'll see some better pictures later, but it's obviously a live activity going on there, and we had the switch has been thrown to the main so that our group can scoot on by while that one-car train is in the siding. There, we're coming closer to the San Luis Central locomotive. They have this locomotive, which is an EMD SW8, number 70. You can almost see that number on the side, the green side of the cab. And they also have one other locomotive, a GE70 tonner, which we didn't get to see, or I don't remember seeing, and I would have remembered seeing it because GE70s are what Santa Maria Valley runs, in addition to a couple other locomotives. They have two 70-ton GE locomotives that they use, so that would have really been fun to see that. But if I did, I totally forgot about it and certainly didn't get a picture of it. I think we're coming into the town of Central here. Still more potatoes on the right and various kinds of storage/elevators of some sort on the either side of the tracks as you go on into town. Well, let's see. I have a question here. Let me see if I can get it. Oh, the question is, how bumpy or rough is the ride on a speeder? Well, that's an interesting question. Basically, the speeders have no suspension, at least none to speak of. So it will be entirely dependent on the track that you're on, what kind of ride you have. If the track is rough, quote unquote, the ride will be rough. If the track is smooth and nice joints and all that sort of thing, then it's not too bad. But it does typically, particularly since usually these excursions are on older tracks, sometimes abandoned tracks, not abandoned in the sense that the railroad let go of the line, but abandoned in the sense that there's no active service anymore on the track, so it isn't maintained as well as it otherwise would be. So it can be bumpy. If you didn't catch it last week, this is just to show you how we turn these speeders around. Most of them have a turntable, it's referred to, underneath in the middle of the car, and when during the ride, that is brought up and held snug up underneath the car. When you stop and need to turn the car around, you flip a switch or turn a crank or do whatever, and the turntable comes down, hits the ground, and keeps going. It's a hydraulic sort of thing, which raises the car up in the air off the rails. So it's only resting on this turntable, and then the turntable will swivel. You can spin the car around, pull the turntable back up into the underneath of the car, which lowers the car back onto the rail, and off you go. It's pretty slick. We talked last time about this large speeder. It's like a 6 or 8 place speeder that was on our trip that time, and it also had a turntable. And this one, additionally, he carried this wood frame for when the base, the space between the ties or something about the ground underneath the speeder was irregular. They could put that down, pull the car over it, and have the turntable come down on it, and then turn the car around. And that's a pretty heavy car. Unlike the others where 4 guys can easily pick it up and turn it around if you don't happen to have a turntable on it or one that's working. This one would not be possible. It'd be just too heavy. There's a better shot of that San Luis Central locomotive. Yellow and green, interesting enough. Remember I mentioned GE 70 tonners. The Santa Maria Valley colors are basically yellow and green. A lot less green on Santa Maria Valley than here, but that's only today, actually. A little fun fact. Originally, the Santa Maria Valley's 70 tonners were mostly dark green with yellow lettering and highlights. There's a shot through the train to one of the speeders on the other side. There's sort of a shot of the big number 3 speeder that we were talking about a minute ago, and their control panel, and through to the San Luis Central equipment. There you can get an idea there. There's that larger speeder, the number 3. You can see how much bigger it is than any of the other cars. The other cars are obviously the more typical size. And there's my host, Bill Schertle. I think I showed you a picture of him last time. Looks like we're underway now, and he's giving a wave bye to the crew as we head back down towards Monte Vista. Back out into the countryside. More potatoes. I think that's, well, I'm not sure if that's potatoes or not. Well, maybe not. Not sure. This is a typical activity, too, when you're on a speeder excursion. Another flagging opportunity. We not only typically flag crossings where we go across roads, but we also use flags to let people in the back of a excursion or behind cars know that the cars, either car or cars in front of them, have stopped. So that you have plenty of distance to stop before you would potentially run into a car that has stopped unexpectedly or even expectedly. So this is a typical sight. You'll often see red flags pop out of cars showing you that that car in front of you is slowing down and probably stopping, or at least be prepared to stop. One of the several rivers we crossed over, or creeks, on this trip. There's our one of our flaggers again, making sure we're clear to go across this road. Okay, now we're going to see, I just brought this map up again to remind us where we are. We left Alamosa, we scooted out to Monte Vista. At Monte Vista, at Sugar Junction, we got on the San Luis Central, went up to the town of Central, and now we're back at Monte Vista. And I just want to make sure you knew exactly where we are when I show you a few of these pictures of things in Monte Vista. I'm not even sure what these are necessarily. This is obviously a train building, or maybe a depot or a station, or who knows what. In Monte Vista, it's an interesting little town in and of itself. I do mean little. And there were some graveyards of sort for various rail cars in a kind of an off area off of Monte Vista. Here's obviously a Pullman-looking car. Here's a few freight cars, a piece of equipment. What I was intrigued by was this little rolling office chair that was sitting on the ground outside there. I can just picture somebody sitting there with a cup of coffee enjoying the view of some old railroad cars. If you're into railroad history, man, that's what you do, right? Oh, somebody suggested sugar beets in that picture, I wasn't sure what the product was. I guess that's possible. I don't really know if sugar beets are still a thing out there or not. It could have been. Good suggestion. There's another old building in Monte Vista. Should make it a haunted house or somebody's mansion or something. Oh, this was kind of fun. There was a school group in Monte Vista, and there's the two highway numbers I mentioned, 285 and 160 in the upper left-hand corner there. And they got a huge kick out of seeing these speeders. I'm not sure maybe any of them ever saw 20 speeders go by on the tracks before. That was kind of fun. Okay, so now we're back at Alamosa, and the next couple of pictures, this is obviously a welcome sign as you're coming into Alamosa. And I think this, I'm not sure if I'm coming into Alamosa from the north or from the east, but either way, at whichever end of town this is, north or east, there is a display of a railroad display, a locomotive and a car, which the car we'll see in a minute. This is Denver and Rio Grande Western number 169, a 460 if you can't quite see all the wheels on the train. The Denver Rio Grande had about 12 of these built by Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1883. Built as a passenger locomotive, 46-inch drivers. That's bigger than it looks kind of in this picture. The second largest drivers used on any of the 3-foot gauge equipment that the SL&RG used. The K-37s, which were kind of a infamous or famous SL&RG locomotive, had 44-inch drivers. This particular locomotive was used during its operational life. It was used on all the major SL&RG narrow gauge lines. Appears in a couple of famous photographs by Otto Perry on the branch to Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1933. It was taken out of service in 1938 and refurbished and sent to the New York World's Fair in 1939. And in 1941, it was returned to the donated to the city of Alamosa, and it's been in this park, Cole Park, C-O-L-E, ever since. And there's the other car that's on display along with it. Wasn't quite sure what kind of a car that was. I probably read a sign while I was there, but I don't remember what it said, and I stupidly didn't take a picture of the sign to remind me. It's a unique, that door's kind of, I'm not sure, maybe a post office car, or, I don't know. If anybody has a good idea, hit the chat button. Okay, now we're going to switch and head out on another day's excursion. We left Alamosa the next morning out and drove out to South Fork, which is out here. Alamosa's back here, South Fork here. And now we're going to ride the westernmost end of the Creede branch of the Denver Rio Grande, which was from South Fork to Creede. I'm not sure I mentioned it. This Creede branch, the La Veta Pass all the way out to Creede, was built in 1881, at least the first part of it was, which I think got them most of the way, maybe to South Fork. So 1881 is the start time, you might say, for this branch. And here we are in South Fork. This is the station master or depot building or whatever for the railroad at the South Fork end of the line that we're going to cover today. There's some equipment, old Rio Grande equipment, a locomotive. At one time, there were some tourist trains that ran out here, and it wasn't that long ago that they stopped doing it. Like, I'm guessing 3 to 5 years ago, maybe a few more years than that, but not terribly long ago. There was a tourist train running from here up to the Watson Y, which is almost to Creede. We'll see that a little later on here. There's some of the cars this railroad had, and that cart sitting on that depot platform. Southern Pacific, there you go, California folks. There was a Southern Pacific locomotive there. I guess that makes sense. The Southern Pacific picked up DNRGW before it merged, not too long before it merged with Union Pacific, as I recall. So I guess it would make sense that a Southern Pacific locomotive would be out here. One of its older little speeders, obviously a two-seater, open air, or at least it's open air now. Some more equipment. This yellow cart is something of a speeder type piece of equipment used to take crews out. I'm not sure if it's powered or not. It does seem to have a motor box and maybe some controls, so maybe it was self-powered to do line work on the railroad. Here's a good picture of a cart coming off a trailer with those beams or bars that are aligned with the gauge of the speeder to set it out. So in this case, it wasn't aligned with the track, but you just roll it out onto the track and then use the turntable to turn it 90 degrees and to set it down on the track. Or you could roll it, kind of depending on however you like to do it. The guy on the right was our host at South Fork here for the day. He might be a member of the Davlin family. Well, no, I'll take that back. That's a different story. I'm not sure who or what he is related to. Maybe that tourist train that was there not too long ago. And here we start some scenic pictures along the route from South Fork. We're just out of South Fork now, or just leaving South Fork, heading up towards Creede. Again, beautiful countryside. We went through a lot of cattle gates on more than normal for this whole Colorado trip that we're doing. Not sure why. I guess there's more cattle grazing going on in this stretch than any of the others. You do catch some attention along the way. This was fairly early in the morning. If you didn't know that, you could maybe guess it by the coffee cup in her hand. Bridge on the right, river on the left, as we head north through some beautiful country. Sheep farming going on, including a black sheep. Every family has to have one, right? And there's the speeders off to the left as we follow this course of this river. Number of river crossings along the way. I get a huge kick out of bridges and trestles and whatnot crossing bodies of water. And here's a pit stop that we took partway up. I'm not sure if there's anything significant about the location, although there was a location along the trip that was something of a small little park, you know, maybe parking spaces for 10 or 20 cars and a few picnic tables, that sort of thing. There's some more friends we made on the way. People just waving, taking pictures. It's kind of a hoot. More pretty countryside. We do kind of get spread out as we're traveling. We do our best to stick together so we can at least see most of ourselves, never get too much out of touch, but it does get spread out. Look at that. That is just pretty. This is most of the way, halfway, some amount of distance along the way from South Fork to Creede, an area called Wagon Wheel Gap. And you can see on the side of the building a wagon wheel with a gap. Kind of a cute logo for the name of the place. The Creede branch of the Denver Rio Grande made it to this location by 1883. Remember I mentioned that the Creede branch itself was mostly in place by 1881. But from South Fork on up here, it took another couple of years to get completed. The 10 miles from Wagon Wheel Gap on to Creede was built by David Moffett to serve a mine in Creede called the Holy Moses Mine. What a great name. And this last 10 miles was eventually sold to the Denver Rio Grande Railroad in 1892. Moffett built it because the Rio Grande wouldn't. They didn't see the value of the investment. But they eventually bought it back. I guess they eventually saw the value of, the Denver Rio Grande eventually saw the value of the investment. They bought it back in 1892, or bought it in 1892. The last Creede area mine, however, closed in 1985. But revenue trains continued to Creede until about 1969. The line actually never made it to Creede all the way. About 2 miles short at the Wasson Y, which we'll see here in a little bit. It was about 2 miles from Creede, and so ore was loaded, trucked or buggied or whatever down to the Wasson Y to load onto a train. This is a cool little storage garage for a speeder right along the track, where you have a track that comes out perpendicular, and then on the left you can see there's the main line, and that circle is sort of your target, you might say, for the turntable that will come down, lift it up, turn it 90 degrees, set it back down. And on the right-hand side, the front porch of the Wagon Wheel Gap station or depot. The tracks are on the back side. And there we all parked there for a little rest stop. It's the Davlin family. Remember, I mistakenly came up with that name a minute ago. The Davlin family is the group that bought this property, including the depot, some number of years to restore it, and did a really nice job. It's a fun little place to be, and we got the grand tour of inside and outside. There's the front porch again. On the side, some other close-ups of the building. Look at that cliff behind it too. Kind of almost majestic site that this is on. Fall colors out amongst the trees in the hills. And there we're leaving Wagon Wheel Gap to head on north. The tour included, by the way, the interior of that depot, but Mrs. Davlin did not permit photos inside, so that's why you didn't get to see any of that. But if you ever are on one of these excursions, you can see the interior, and it's pretty cool for yourself. More cattle crossings. There's a good sort of spread out excursion group across the valley floor there. Some old Rio Grande, Denver Rio Grande cattle cars, it looks like, sitting off to the side. They haven't been used in a while. And now we've made it to the Wasson Y. And it really is a railroad Y, W-Y-E. In 1956, the last steam train on the Rio Grande ran from Alamosa to Creede and back. So that gives you an idea of when some activity at least came to a halt. And I mentioned that the segment bought by the Rio Grande Railroad back in late 1800s, very late 1800s. The South Fork to Creede segment was bought again in 1999 by the Denver and Rio Grande Historical Foundation who paid $625K in 1999 for that part of the railroad. They in turn sold it to the San Luis and Rio Grande, which was owned by Rail America at the time in 2003. And then in 2005, the SL&RG, the San Luis and Rio Grande, was sold to Iowa Pacific, and I'm not sure where it is now. Remember we talked a little bit last time about the fact that the San Luis and Rio Grande is having some financial trouble. There's bankruptcy stories, articles about them, so I'm not sure what their status is today. But anyway, here we are at the Y. We spent some time out here, some interesting things to note, including this stub switch, which you don't see very often. It's not a switch system like we're used to with the points that go up against the outside rails. This is actually 4 rails come in to the switch, 2 of which go one direction, the other 2 going the other direction from the switch. It was kind of fun. I've never seen one of those, particularly one that was operable. Here's another angle of it from the other side. You can see there was a little bit of interest in this thing. It's lined to go basically kind of to the left, and that's not the way to look at it. If you're coming the way that speeder is doing, this is aligned to go on a right divergent track. And if you threw it, this rail would come against the main rail, and this rail would come against the main rail, and the speeder coming into and through the switch would go to its left, leaving the switch. Pretty clever in some senses. These did not tend to get jammed by snow, for instance. Trying to get points up against a rail when it's covered with snow can be difficult. That's not a problem in this case. The 2 rails just kind of push the snow out of the way, no matter which way it's going. On the other hand, a fair amount of the rail is not firmly attached to anything. It more slides across the ties, so they're definitely not meant for high speed. Another disadvantage of them is that if things aren't aligned right when a train goes through it, the likelihood of a derailment is considerably greater than a point switch kind of system. Although that can derail too if you're not lined right. Okay, so let's move on here. Okay, now we've been to the Y. We turned the cars on the Y. We didn't use the turntables. We just turned it on the Y. All of us, and now we're headed back towards South Fork. With all those cattle crossings, I don't know how many times we stopped to take the barriers down and then after we got through, put the barriers back up. Good fishing up there. One of these days I have to learn how to fly fish. I really want to do that. I've never had even a fly fishing pole in my hand. One of the cool little bridges along the way. And here we are approaching that same bridge. Still with the DNRG emblem on it. And here we are actually on it. Crossing the river. Cowboy out on the plains. I'm not quite sure what his story is, but looked pretty comfortable to me. 2 different shots, one on the left, one on the right. Kind of what you see closer to South Fork on this segment. And here's kind of the last shot. Speeder's heading away from us. Sayonara. See you later. On one of the last cattle crossings of the trip. Okay, that wraps up the Colorado Fall Color Speeder excursion. The last thing that I want to, or just a little quick thing I want to talk to you about here is Strasbourg, Colorado. which is the red pin on the map in front of you at the moment. Strasbourg, Colorado is celebrating this very day, today, August 15th, 2020, the 150th anniversary of the real transcontinental railroad completion, according to them. Here's a plaque. Sorry the picture isn't any better than it is, but I kind of grabbed it from a... I've never been out there. I would have gone out today had there been the annual celebration that they normally do, and this being the 150th, it would have been a big one. But COVID shut that all down. So I'm just telling you about it. If you want to go out there with me for the 151st next year, let me know. I'll go with you. Anyway, August 15th, 1870, at Comanche Crossing, which we'll see here in a minute, the Kansas Pacific Railroad drove the last spike on a continuously rail transcontinental railroad. Up until that point, August 15th of 1870, the Union Pacific Central Pacific transcontinental line was not continuously rail. They had no bridge over the Missouri River at that time. At the time of 1869 is when they claimed the completion was, but they did not have a bridge across the Missouri River until 1872. Up until then, they tried, or they hadn't tried, they ferried cars across the river. They tried to actually cross the river when it was iced over, but that didn't prove to be a particularly smart idea. Whereas on the other hand, the Kansas Pacific Railroad had a rail link across the Missouri River in 1869, a year earlier than this golden spike occurred. In Kansas City is where their bridge crossed it. But interestingly enough, Union Pacific gained control of the Kansas Pacific in 1874, which wasn't too much later. So either way you look at it, Union Pacific was involved in this. And UP got complete control, ownership of the Kansas Pacific by 1880. On the website, you will be able to get the link. It's not there now, but it will be soon, as we're done here. There's a nice little brochure, pamphlet, I'm not sure what you call it, that somebody put out, rgusrail.com maybe, about everything you want to know about their celebration anniversary, their story. This is the little railroad building depot in Strasburg, not far from Comanche Crossing, which we'll see here in a minute, but in this building is the museum, the Kansas City Railroad and Comanche Crossing Museum. And the town was named, the name Strasburg was named after or in honor of a Kansas Pacific Railroad official. I don't know what his job was, but they renamed the town in his honor that same year, 1870. And here's that building from the other side. And here's a sign that's out there, looks pretty old. And somewhere, I'm not for sure if it's on this sign, I think it is, it talks about the claim they make of laying 10.5 miles of track in 9 hours to complete this segment on August 15th of 1870. I think that might break the record of the 10-mile one-day project along the Central Pacific, crossing the for the 1869 Promontory meetup. I'm not sure about that, but I thought that they're basically making a claim at two different things here. And this bridge gets the rail line. That's the active Union Pacific rail line, by the way, the main line that runs from Kansas City to Denver. that bridge goes across Comanche Creek. Yeah, I think it's called Comanche Creek. And we'll see another angle in a minute. You can see how just humongous that is, I say facetiously. In the insert in the upper right, there's an obelisk that, at one time anyway, marked the location of this golden spike. The exact spot is not marked. You would not know exactly where the last spike was driven. And I don't even think that monument in the upper right there was in a park in Strasbourg somewhere, and I don't even think it's still there. At least it seems to me I remember reading something that it had disappeared or been moved or something. So here's a from the side angle of that bridge across Comanche Creek. You can see it's just a wild water kind of creek. So enough said on that, right? There is an interesting other thing to note in Strasbourg. There is the Eureka Locomotive Works company. I think they're still in business. At least they were up until just recently, and we'll show you a picture of that. And they do. I read that they've worked on Durango and Silverton trains. They've worked on Georgetown Loop steam locomotives. I think it's a relatively going concern, or at least it was until very, very recently. Here's a picture of a steam locomotive. This was just a few weeks ago, July 31st. This 1903 steam locomotive was leaving Strasbourg, leaving the Eureka Locomotive Works to go back to, or go to Ohio. I don't know where it was going, presumably some railroad museum or something. Anyway, that's activity involving Eureka Locomotive Works as recently as a few weeks ago. And in 2019, most of you, I'm sure, recall the big boy taking its swing around the west, ultimately, or as part of that, ending up at the 150th at Promontory. Well, not at Promontory, but as close as it could get in Ogden, Utah. Anyway, there is a video on YouTube, which again I will have a link to on the Parlor Car Chats page, that shows the 4014 in Strasbourg, Colorado last year. And not only is the 4014 interesting to look at in that video, obviously, but also in the panning and the various scenes that the video captures, you can see a little bit of Strasbourg, the town.